Hi guys, so I'm back with tools black women can bring to the dating market, and we are aware of the saying she's got game, which is used to describe women who have success in dating, know how to seduce men, and secure marriage. But basically, in my eyes, it is women who know what makes men insecure and use that to their benefit. When I speak of bringing something to the dating market or the table, which men in our community are obsessed with, it means what benefit do you bring a man that would make him want to be committed to you? There are millions of women we are competing against for the affection of the men we desire, but women who have game use what they intrinsically have to differentiate themselves from other women to get the type of man they want, be it wealthy, kind, powerful. And I'll explore what these things are. And just a disclaimer, this is not a PC video. It's not always going to be kosher. Typically, I would keep such content on my private website, but everything is on the internet, so why not this? By the way, I'm not a pro-black woman. I'm typically just here for black women being with quality men, and this video may put you off if you're not a strategic woman. But I'm just one woman giving my opinion on dating as a black woman and the psyche of men. And you don't have to agree with everything I say. I'm not preaching anything. This is just what I see. I believe a prerequisite to this video would be watching this video. This is definitely a must to get the basis on my views on why our desirability as black women is questioned and the type of men black women should be going for. So please watch that video in full first before watching this video. Firstly, when we talk about things women have intrinsically, i.e. tools to bring to the dating game that sets them apart from others, we will have to begin with race. Now, interracial dating is a big part of game for women. And I've seen black women immaturely make statements about non-black women like, with all that privilege, why the hell would she date a black guy? But those women know that she can use what she intrinsically has, skin tone, ethnicity, etc., to separate herself from the other women that usually pursue that man. Even in The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene, he states how one of the easiest men to seduce are those he calls the exotic fetishists and people who are obsessed with the new and exotic and think that their exhilaration is far outside themselves, i.e., coming from something foreign. It's funny how in many of the Hardwick Soft Life think pieces, many did not recognize that it's not that white men in any way, shape, or form like wigs, let alone bad ones, but there is a novelty in dating someone of another race, meaning less is required from that woman. And I'll return to this. As I discuss in my article on interracial dating, which you can access in my ebook, black women have the ability to make other races of men feel like men. Because when it comes to masculinity, black men typically embody that more than other races. And other races of women prefer black men to other men of color. And so men usually look to the counterpart of what their women like, us, unless they are, racist or insecure about BBC and black men's sexual prowess. But most men at the top, who I believe are the men who black women should be looking at, who are successful, content, not as insecure, will be more open to black women. And there's definitely space for black women to excel in that area. We as a whole just don't put anyone, especially non-black men, on a pedestal or above black men. So we really have the ability to make certain men feel like the top dog, the most masculine. And this is why I always feel uncomfortable when I see black women putting groups of non-black men on a pedestal, not just because of rampant racism and anti-blackness that still exists, but you're almost taking away that flex that comes with being with a black woman as a non-black man, as it is not always a common occurrence. So you have to bear that in mind. Not only is it problematic and embarrassing, you're doing something that goes against your own interests. And another thing is that as a black woman, you can give these non-black men kids that will embody the positive aspects of blackness. You can give them sons who will be masculine, great musicians, athletes, and most men, if not all, have a huge affinity for sportsmen.
Ollie Watkins has got afro hair. It's called afro hair, so it's like really curly. Okay, so you don't have the same kind of hair. It's okay.
There's so much I could post highlighting this. I don't know if you guys have seen that viral video of a mixed guy saying people think he's good looking until he shows his father, who is a white man. And everyone in the comments is like, OMG, you've won at life, superior genes. And you have to like think about these kind of things. Also, as I just posted, you saw on a global stage the commentator referring to Jude Bellingham, the product of a black woman and a white man, as England's son during his match. You know, he's our golden boy. He's the ideal. He's attractive. He's talented. And the reality is that only you as a black woman can create that. And not to be disrespectful or offensive, but it's hard for me to believe that most men desire Asian and Hispanic sons. And even though Asian men are very successful, most men don't look up to Asian or Hispanic men the way they would revere a Kobe or a Saka. And you have to understand that there is a huge difference in what men want in a wife and what they want in a son or a daughter. The traits that we see as negative in black women, such as being strong and independent, are traits many would love in their daughters, as opposed to them being docile and overly accessible. And this is how in dating, even in life, you can flip the negatives and make them a positive. Sure, men don't want strong, independent wives, but they want strong, independent daughters. And I have had first-hand experiences with a white man and his Eurasian son who was very socially inept, and the dynamic was very off. And you see this often on forums where Eurasian kids discuss their hardships or being the product of these unions. And some men don't think this far ahead when seeking a partner, but you can hint at it as a strategic woman. You know, every woman is selling herself, and you can subconsciously hint to these non-black men who have the ability to enhance your life that you can give them a daughter who won't take no shit or a future Lewis Hamilton in a way others can't. Now, number two, looking at stereotypes. Now, I've referenced this problematic video that I've linked below, where the porn stars are discussing their preference for black women for a range of reasons in the past, because I think it's very hard to get men speaking so plainly this way. And so one of the men says he prefers dark-skinned black women. And he says darker black women have hotter pussies. Now, look, as a black woman, I know this is disgusting. We don't want to be spoken about this way, but sex takes up a large part of a man's mind. And as women, we all have the same one vagina. Like, even the other guy says, oh yeah, darker women have hotter pussies. Or maybe it's a psychological thing from seeing the contrast in skin tone. So you see how some things are not real, they are imagined, but they still separate you from other women. But when you have game, you're able to use these racial stereotypes to differentiate yourself. Yes, some of these stereotypes are and were rooted in negativity, but like any alchemist, we should be able to transform what is negative into something that's beneficial for us. And as I've quoted before, many black women, it appears to me, have a very strange relationship with sex, like from trauma-based hypersexuality to like abstaining altogether due to toxic relationships or conservatism, guilt, abuse. Obviously we are held to like a Puritan like standard, so that also gets to us. And this can sometimes lead to black women craving intimacy from wherever they can get it. Now, not to go off topic, but this is an important area for black women to think about, like their relationship with sex. And I came across an article on Black Ballad on the path to unlearning sexual shame. And it has some great ideas that I want to highlight. But I won't link the article because I believe the article devalues marriage, and that's just something Black women do not need. But that's clearly because it was written from a Nigerian UK point of view, where marriage is held to a very high standard. But for Black women in the West, I just can't endorse that whatsoever. But the key aspects of the article were: when you mentally place marriage as the only way you think sex shall be guilt free, you inevitably disempower yourself by giving the power of your body and mind to another person. You end up living your life as though your body is a land that you are merely leasing until the real landowner comes and takes full ownership of his rightful property. If you teach a young girl that her desires are bad and sex makes her promiscuous, it shouldn't be surprising when these teachings follow her into marriage. I do think that when women decide to be celibate or sex free outside of the doctrine of sexual purity, it is one of the most powerful things, because then you truly learn that you don't have to say yes to every sexual advance if it doesn't feel right to you or your soul. And if you don't feel respected, the most powerful thing a woman can do for her mind and agency is to understand that her body is hers and hers alone. And so for Black women getting in touch with their sexuality, I do recommend therapy around the subject. I also recommend masturbation, which is a bit taboo for some of you, especially for younger girls 18 to 2022, so they can use their sexuality for their benefit instead of like it being used against them, or dropping your pants for any man who blows on your neck because you've never connected to your bodies, or low self-esteem, which often leads to single motherhood, which exacerbates many issues which I've explained on my website. So those of us in touch with our sexuality in a healthy way, we can use our race to make our vaginas appear special. And I feel no way in saying that. It is what it is. However, I will say that with men, especially Black men, playing on the, you know, hypersexual stereotype, being a woman who enjoys sex, it can be somewhat difficult because a lot of Black men associate our sexuality with dysfunction, i.e., single motherhood. And I've talked about this before. And Black women also have politicized themselves to such an extent that many don't see Black women as very sexual beyond the media. And that may be surprising. Many Black men, for example, have said, "Oh, I seek white women because they give head or they do this and they do that." And I think when dating, the key is to reconnect with your feminine nature and deal with any, problematic thoughts you have around sex that prevent you from being comfortable in your sexuality, because there is power in sex, point blank, period, but in a way that's beneficial for you. It is something that you should benefit from. And because Black men shame, you know, sexual Black women so much, I think sometimes it confuses Black women. It makes them think that being a good girl or like super successful and educated will give them brownie points. But Black men don't always care about that, unless they are opportunists. They're more focused on a woman's looks and sensuality. So it is important to connect with your sexuality in a healthy and fun way. Now, earlier I spoke about how, you can give non-Black men, for example, children that embody the positive aspects of Blackness and will be accepted in the West and seen as Western. But for all men, what one man wants from his partner is different from what he wants from his kids. And we can see that amongst all races of men, that Western women sometimes get a bad rap. Of course, oftentimes from a dusty, but nonetheless, so if you have foreign ancestry, direct Caribbean or African ancestry, and you live in the West, you can play up the positive aspects of being a woman from that region. Exoticize yourself through music, makeup, clothes, accessories, and this will intrigue your partner and separate you from the negative narratives that Western women may have, especially as a Black woman. I think this is quite important because, there are a few negative narratives about Western Black women that you may not really want to align with. Like I said, this is all a game. So don't take it too personally. Exoticize yourself, look at your ancestry and see what you can pick up. And also, being from the global south, it enables you to play the damsel, and most men want to play the hero. Trigger that savior complex in men by highlighting, experiences of women in those regions. And another thing is that you can always use your ethnicity when you want people to engage with you in a way that differs from how people may assume you like to be treated. So, for example, if you expect marriage in 2 years and you don't engage in sex before marriage, but are in an environment where Black women don't do that, for example, like America, there are assumptions on some Black American women, but you can put it on your Senegalese or whatever background and say, hey, this is your norm. Even if you're 1/8 Senegalese, you can say, yep, it's my norm to expect marriage in 2 years, and he will have to work with that or not. Now, number three, age. Now, youth is scientifically proven to be very attractive to men. And we know that for the most part, if there's two women and they have very similar credentials, one is 28, the other 48, most men of all ages will gravitate to the younger lady. Even if you look at someone like the Xerox CEO, Ursula Burns, when asked what advice she has for young women, she stated, marry someone 20 years older. Now, it doesn't have to be 20 years, but as her husband was an older engineer, he was successful, he was able to retire and look after her children while she climbed the corporate ladder to become the first Black woman to be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Now, Ursula is not a conventional beauty in our community, but by marrying older, she was able to have the life that she desired. She was able to marry a quality educated man, 31 years till his death. She was able to have children and she was able to have career success. And I recall, the words of Sade Okoya, who upgraded her life after marrying her billionaire husband, stating, my marriage wouldn't have lasted if I had married a younger man. And so, using these factors, age and race, stereotypes, what have you, you are able to have the life you want, even when people suggest otherwise, and it may just look a bit different than what you imagined as a child. And Asian women are very successful in dating, partly because their counterparts don't invoke insecurity in other men. And if you attract insecure men, then they are typically very easy to seduce. But also due to their education and the spaces they frequent, they have greater access to quality men. But another reason is that they are very good at using certain tools to differentiate themselves from other women. They often use race, age, and stereotypes in combination to get what they want, be it a wealthy man, high status man, or just a foreign man who they view as better. And when you desire a very top tier man, I'm talking like millionaire, if you're that type of woman, you oftentimes have to use these factors in combination to increase your chances of obtaining one. And some of the richest Black men have young non Black wives because those women capitalize on race and age to get the bag. They know that this separates me from the type of women that probably would usually look his way. And so, however, I've noticed that even with billionaires, not always, but sometimes when they marry Black women, they are usually older. And Black women as a whole get married later than other races. So I'm not too sure why there is a lot of negativity in the West surrounding a younger Black woman using her youth to seduce an older man. I noticed that this is frowned upon in Western Black communities, and those women are shamed and called gold diggers. And in other communities, the women would comment goals, which probably contributes to their higher marriage rate. And I would love for us to ponder on why it is frowned upon, even when it's a mere 5 year difference. On one level, I think it's partly because of the predatory behavior you see in the hood where some old dusty has exploited women all his life and now wants a fresh young girl to prey on. And these relationships are rarely healthy. But again, I write for women that avoid dusty men, whether young or old. But on the other hand, I also think that because black women usually marry later, some older black women have some type of resentment towards that dynamic because they don't want to compete with young women. And so they don't teach their daughters the game and shame women with older partners, unlike in Asian communities who are taught the power of youth and embrace it even to an OTT level. And I'm sure you've seen many couples that look like this, and they've occurred for a very, very long time. And what I speak about is not related to the sex pact dynamic, which is gross and nothing to praise, but I'm talking about educated Asian American, Asian European women who actively seek out these men. And some of these gaps are extreme, but again, Asian women will do what they have to do to get what they want. I'm personally such a fan of Asian women and how they behave because I know that as a black woman, as a woman of color, no one is really there to save you. So you have to put yourself first at all times in order to live the type of life you want to live. And I also think partly because Asian women and other races of women are less comfortable being with men who don't view them as a prize than I think black women are, because of the narratives we internalize, that we have been conditioned to almost accept a lowly position. And therefore, non black women will go anywhere to find good treatment, anywhere to find a man who sees them as valuable. Whereas black women think more along the lines of, hey, I would rather be with this because it looks good. Even though it isn't good, it looks good. Rather than I'm with some dude who worships me, but it may not be aesthetically appealing. They think to themselves, I'm a young, exotic woman, and I can find an older, sometimes nerdy white man to upgrade me. There may be pretty white women out there, and most Asian women do have a complex about that, but it would probably be those closer to his age interested in him. So when Ming Lee pops up 10 years, 20 years, even 30 years younger, she stands out, and Ming knows that. One could ask themselves if these wealthy white men were younger or not lacking in other areas, as I alluded to in my desirability video, or we lived in a different world where men weren't dealing with a lot of different insecurities, they probably wouldn't date those women or date out the race. And a lot of black women see that as an L, but who cares? Would Kanye date Kim if she didn't have white skin? Asian women show you the game plan for women of color. And although it is not for everyone, it is a way. Asian women never feel the need to explain their choices. This is a trait I love in a woman, bold women, because black women always feel the need to explain or debate. And so we're constantly shamed and baited because those doing the shaming know it gets to us. And they never feel, Asian women never feel ashamed with a certain type of man because they put their needs first and they know they don't owe anyone anything. And so when these relationships succeed, it further bolsters positive stereotypes about them being feminine, good wives. But when you're a beautiful black woman but want to date without using these intrinsic tools, and you end up dating a young rapper who cheats on you, coughs in notes, and you end up a single mother, this reinforces negative stereotypes that we as black women must be doing something wrong or lack certain traits. So you have to learn to use these factors as a woman. Sometimes I even catch myself because I remember I was watching Wags Miami and there was a beautiful girl called Darnell. And I found out recently that she had been divorced a second time. And a quick thought just ran through my head like she's probably boring or she isn't good in bed. And I don't know why this just ran through my head, but I caught myself and realized that no, she only dates NFL players, and another guy would probably worship her. But all these failed relationships, becoming baby mamas, this sends a message to the world and wider society that there is something wrong with you, even though you probably have so much to offer. We have to understand some men will always be more willing than others to meet your needs. Don't act like there isn't non-black women going through hell when they date poorly, just like many black women do. So of course, if you're a vixen type of woman and you're dating a more nerdy guy, it's more likely to be successful. And Asian women realize that, hey, I'm competing with so many women and I need to find a way to distinguish myself, and I have to use everything I can. And so they regularly use race and know it represents things that are real or imagined. And when we look at someone like Kea Hefner, who was the final wife of Hugh Hefner's brother on the left, and a lot of these women, to be honest, with what a typical Indonesian would consider beautiful on the right, it's clear to me that as an Indonesian woman, she would not fit the general standard of beauty. And this doesn't mean that she couldn't date a 30-year-old Asian man, but she would have to compete with a bunch of other Indonesian women, especially as women of color, as we navigate in these colorist and futurist communities. It would be difficult for her to secure a top tier Asian man. And so she thought to herself, I'm a young Asian woman and I can use this to plot on a certain type of man to enhance my life. And unfortunately, a lot of black women would rather beg certain types of men to see beauty in them and don't want to use such tools to further themselves in the dating game, because they perceive it as unethical or they aren't familiar with the darker side of femininity. Bear in mind, I totally understand black women who don't want to date out their race or date someone older, but I think in this day and age, with all the disparities against us, I'm not sure how long we can empathize with poor dating choices. And your average Western 25-year-old black girl just wants to be with a 26-year-old black guy from the same class, same background, and expects to be married for 70 plus years. And this rarely happens. This is why in cultures like Japan, where they are expected to be married by 30, but stay married till like 100, where everyone somewhat looks similar, the idea of fidelity is very flexible because that's difficult to achieve. But in the West, we're not as accepting of such things. And so we need to use what we have to get the desired behavior we want out of our partners. Other races understand that there are things I can bring to the table, more ammunition for the war, which means that I don't have to compete as much with other women. An Asian woman with a non-Asian man does not have to bring as much to the table as she would have to with an Asian man. A white woman with a man of color does not have to bring as much to the table as she would have to with a white man. And this is why Anna Bay, can't help you. These women make it easier for themselves and use what they've got to make the vagina seem a bit more special. And black women don't want to bring any weapons to the fight, i.e., dating. And so it's no surprise some are losing. Marriage is a construct, which means it's not something natural to us. It was created. And when something has been created, you have to use certain tools to make it work or at least give it a greater chance of survival. The whole just wait on God for your perfect man is problematic. And I greatly believe in a higher power and don't believe we should remove God or spirituality from our daily lives. But marriage is a construct. There are things, dynamics in the world that we have created, and so we have to deal with them. And I'll use an example of most Hispanic women being raised in anti Black households or having some level of disdain for Black women, but still dating a Black man if he can enhance their life and put them on a pedestal. And so you see with Solange, she is obviously an anti Black Latina who has made negative comments about Black women. And she has a daughter with the rapper Little Yachty. And despite her views, doesn't mind having a half Black daughter because Yachty is a millionaire. And in contrast to a black woman who, if she has great disdain for white people or white women or whoever, would not date a white man, even if he could enhance her life. And we're made to feel like we have to love everything about every culture to date within them. And I've seen silly videos aimed at black women, like you have to like white women to date white men. And it's like, but such narratives are never aimed at women who date black men. And I remember a woman saying that other races see men as tools, but we are still focused on things that aren't important. When it comes to black men, there is such a huge gender war in our community. And so, if you are a black woman who desires a black man, understand that they are craving for a black woman to treat them like a king. Now, don't take this behavior online and publicize it because that has harmed us as a whole. And so, stick to one on one interactions. But you can make a black man believe that, no one can love him like you do, and you're still that conditioned woman who puts black men above all to get what you want. And many of you think otherwise, but due to our history, black men have a great incentive to get it together for you as a black woman. And the fact that many don't is why it's no surprise to me that many of their relationships with others are just as poor. Like, I know it's never going to be anything productive. However, you can always make a black man feel that your relationship represents something bigger, get your hotep on and suggest that, there's an agenda and your coupling shows the world a strong black family. Another thing is many men pay for the girlfriend experience, and this is basically where men can get the perks of a woman and she's able to make him feel good, but nothing is required of him besides the money. But in some countries, that is very little. And so men are extremely insecure, and many men are currently unable to meet the standards of manhood. And so many want a woman where they can get her feminine energy and love, but there isn't pressure on him to act in a certain way, show up in a certain way to obtain it, or a need to like sell himself to a woman, because that pressure has put many men in a very low place. And so, as a woman, if you can represent someone who doesn't require a man to show up perfectly, or not much is required from him. Now, bear in mind, this is an article on game. So, of course, this should be a man who is an asset, a provider, can enhance your life. But he wants to feel like he doesn't have to show up perfectly to get your love, affection, attention. And that is something that just naturally exudes from you. Play the game. And I want to note here that if you are a woman who is able to date very, very successful men, top of the food chain, like millionaire, top shelf, these men typically don't want someone who hangs on their every word, because they could easily pay for that. They do usually like a challenge, someone who engages with them differently from how most people do. So, game differs depending on the type of man, even though some things are universal because male nature is the same. Now, in this fascinating interview I read with an escort that I've regularly quoted, where she's discussing the male psyche, she says, I really wish you knew how insecure many men really are. You can never give your man enough pep talks, compliments, and admiring looks. Do that, and he'll become putty in your hands. Now, in my opinion, women who don't accommodate for the insecurities of men, those that are worthy, of course, will be left behind. And I believe women who are considered the most desirable in our society do it very well, or of course reside in an ecosystem that men do not feel threatened by, but they stroke that ego and they know how to make a man feel like he's a somebody. And I think it's always good as a black woman to ask yourself while dating, what kind of man would get the most out of me finding him attractive? Now, Western black women, to me, unfortunately, don't embody pleasure. When a lot of men see black women, they don't always see a woman who cooks good, F's good, is supportive, even though we may have these traits, because in a lot of men's eyes, we've politicized ourselves so much, to our own detriment, instead of understanding that our greatest activism as black women is being happy, is being valued and treated with respect. And so we're obsessed with the isms and are quick to debate and respond. But men have to prove themselves in other spaces, so they don't want to do that with a woman. Not that you don't have a brain or opinions, but you are just meant to represent peace and pleasure as a woman. And non-black women will look past anything to be put on a pedestal. And many black women ask themselves, well, where's our pedestal? It will be visible to you when you use factors like race, age, stereotypes to differentiate yourself, and you will encounter men who will view you as a prize. To conclude, what contributes to success and longevity in a relationship is using the intrinsic factors I've stated to separate yourself from other women, representing pleasure and peace in human form, and also subconsciously letting men know three things. Now, these three things are: one, fidelity is a two-way street; two, their penis will not work forever; and three, you will be there to look after him in old age. Now, in relation to one, men are extremely insecure. I don't know how many times I have to say this. And in no way do you want to trigger men too much in a relationship, because the relationship will no longer be enjoyable for them and it can be dangerous for you. But in The Art of Seduction, Robert Greene explains how to create triangles. Impose a number between you two and make the target compete with your past and present. Again, don't trigger a man too much. Men want to feel good in a relationship, but sometimes you need to let them know that their position isn't guaranteed. To expand on too, because there's so much talk about a woman's age and the wall, we sometimes forget that men lose their stamina and ability to perform too. And no, you don't straight up tell your partner that you can do better or his sex game is whack. Stay positive. And typically, as Black women, we already don't attract those type of men for the most part. They would typically be too insecure to even approach a Black woman if they were that insecure. But you can subconsciously drop these seeds if he's getting too comfortable, and let your partner know that you've chosen him out of many, and randomly tell him the story about your friend who left her partner for a toy boy. Just use these mind tricks. And three came to me when I was watching a gangster movie, and the older gangster was telling his underling to find a girl because he doesn't want him to disappear and no one notices. Now, some of you have spent so long drowning in toxic online content that you forget that women bring so much to a man. And again, use your brain and drop hints. Obviously, not on the second date, to tell your man this, but from time to time, let him know that, hey, there's someone who will be there wiping his ass when he's 90 if he continues meeting your needs. And so, as a Black woman, I've always felt like we trigger men so much. But if you trigger someone, you basically control them. But the issue is that this goes both ways. So we have to learn to stop being so reactive. But trust me, many of you have the tools to get what you want from men.